Okay. So yeah, so this is just kind of an overview of the scope. You know, we're trying to create a more inclusive process, promote more competition within the application process. I'm trying to make it more equitable for applicants. And so these are the kind of areas that we're looking at. We've talked about this before, kind of the overall structure, outreach, application contents. Tonight, we're just going to be talking about the process, the review process. So this is kind of what we've been doing for the last few months. We did an applicant survey in, one second. We did an applicant survey from February to March. There were 36 total responses. I sent you guys an overview of the survey responses, but I am going to go through it here too tonight. You know, we talk a little bit about what we heard there. We've also been holding some focus groups with applicants who, you know, both applicants who are kind of locals, Arlington, maybe smaller nonprofits that only operate in the county, and then some other regional or more nationally focused nonprofits that have programs in Arlington. We've talked, so within those two focus groups, there were 14 or 15 organizations that participated. We have been meeting with the CDCAC task force. So again, thanks to Jennifer Bodie, Steve Gallagher, McCoy, Kaufman, Laura Malkoff, Margaret McGilvray, and Wendy Thomas for helping to you know, think through some of these changes. Everything that we're talking about tonight, they have kind of helped think through whether it's a process that will potentially work for everyone. So if you have problems with it, you can complain to them. I'm just kidding. So just really, I did want to just really quickly talk about the feedback form data that we got back from applicants. So again, there were 36 total responses, about a 60% response rate. So of the total number of people that we sent it to, 6% responded, which is, you know, pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah. Actually. There were 9 respondents that didn't complete the full survey, which was a little bit frustrating and made the analyzing the data a little bit challenging. But like they answered some questions, but just not all of them. So not sure what happened there. There's a pretty, you know, decent mix of both large and small organizations based on organizational budget that responded. So, you know, we're getting a sense of, you know, I kind of split out some of the data based on that data point. And most of the applicants that responded are operating either youth programs or, you know, a different type of public service program. Again, we had a lot of respondents who participated in the survey are operating in sort of the DMV region. There are some that only work in Arlington, and about the same amount that are kind of national or sort of maybe operate beyond just the DMV. Most organizations that responded have less than 10 staff working for the organization, so smaller in size. But in terms of those who are working on this Community Development Fund program, the difference between you know, full-time and part-time staff. You know, larger organizations tend to have more full-time staff working on it. Smaller organizations tend to have more part-time staff working on the program. As far as their focus on racial equity, the organizations that responded, you know, most of them are working, soliciting input from racially diverse community members and stakeholders during their planning process for sort of how they develop their programs, which is great. And, you know, you can see that a lot of them are actively seeking representatives from communities of color to serve in their boards or their committees. So those are great sort of, you know, racial steps towards racial equity these organizations are taking. It kind of drops off a little bit when you look at those who are, you know, have written public declarations. So like a racial equity declaration or, you know, things like that, training or development opportunities. But we just thought it'd be interesting to see sort of what organizations are doing in this area, and where we can maybe ask some questions maybe in the application that kind of get to some of these types of steps. As far as their capacity when it comes to grant writing, a lot of the organizations that responded are taking more than 2 weeks to complete their applications. Larger organizations even are taking a decent amount of time. So I think it kind of goes to show that, they're putting a lot of work and time into the application. It kind of also goes to the point that a lot of applicants had that the application is way too long, which I think everyone in this room would agree anyway. So that's, I think, a good, indicator that maybe the application needs to be pared down quite a bit. We asked about how many grant applications organizations are submitting outside of just the Community Development Fund. I mean, most organizations are submitting more than 10 applications. They're out there. They're sort of really putting in the groundwork to figure out what other grant opportunities are, out there. There's only one that said that the Community Development Fund is the only application they submit. So that's good. We know that means that, folks are spreading out their applications to and not just relying on the Community Development Fund. And then as far as who's actually writing the grant application, most are, it's an executive director or sort of an organizational leader, or they have a dedicated grant writer. A lot of the larger organizations that have that dedicated grant writer or fundraiser that is working on their applications, which I think we kind of knew, but it's just good to get that confirmation. Nearly half of the respondents have received between 5 to 10 grants over the last 10 years. So a lot of the organizations we work with, again, we knew this, are coming back year after year. They're relying on the Community Development Fund for ongoing funding. And most applicants that have received between 5 to 10 grants over the last 10 years are applying to sustain their existing funding. So that, I think that's, again, something that we have suspected, that it's sort of this, reliable funding source that folks kind of have grown accustomed to using and needing for their budget. But that's, I know that there are some mixed feelings about whether that's something that we should be focusing on. As far as the application process, I think most applicants were generally pretty positive around what our application looks like. I think most, the area where there was sort of the most disagreement of sort of what the application looks like is really about the number of questions in the required documents. And we heard this a lot in our focus groups. Too many questions, a lot of redundancy, too much information required, not enough space to be able to answer the question the way that we want to answer it. So I think that's a great indicator that, and reason to, that a good indicator for supporting the idea to really pare down the application and kind of make sure that we're only asking the questions that we absolutely need to be asking in the application. And then some also said that the application process is difficult given the level of funding available. But again, hopefully with a simpler application, maybe this will be alleviated in some way. And then again, as far as we did ask them about the post-award process, this is basically once you get the funding, are the requirements challenging? And, again, most were generally pretty positive about our processes. I think the biggest issue that folks have is really around the quarterly reporting and kind of the amount of information that we ask. And unfortunately, that's just something that we can't really get around because we are required to ask that information because of our funders. So yeah, that's, something to think about, but not necessarily something that will be super easy to fix, unfortunately. So yeah, as far as the main feedback from the main takeaways from the feedback form, generally, again, application is redundant, long, word limits don't really allow enough space. And then some of the requirements of the application are unnecessary or challenging to complete. So the sustainability question got a lot of we got a lot of feedback on that one, got a lot of feedback on leverage. letters of support. So those are all areas that, we're going to be looking at when we look to revise the application. Again, as far as post-award process, reporting, again, while it has improved over the years, there have been challenges with it. We had a lot of feedback on our existing grants management software, which we are transitioning away from. So that's, hopefully some of those issues will be fixed with this new system. We'll see about that. But generally, I think most applicants were pretty positive about the post-award requirements. And another thing that we talked a little bit about in the feedback form, and then a lot about in the focus groups, was the review process in general, and sort of the applicant's involvement there. There were a lot of mixed feelings about the presentations. I would say most of the repeat applicants were unfavorable of the presentation requirement, just because they are doing it year after year, and it becomes a little bit redundant for them. And I mean, there were others that also kind of echoed that feedback. So that's something that we want to be taking a look at through this proposal, through the evaluation process. And then not to toot our own horn, but most staff respondents were pretty supportive of staff, so we were happy to hear that. So that was good to hear. Does anyone have any questions about any of that? And I can't see hands, so if you have one, just please jump in.
I'm not sure why letters of support were challenging too. So maybe they mean they were unnecessary.
Yeah, so I think I can maybe answer that a little bit just based on what I've heard. And this was both in the feedback form, but they also talked a lot about this in the focus groups, which I didn't attend those, so I've only heard the secondhand. But what I heard was, let me just turn my, what I heard was that the letters of support, a lot of these organizations are asking for letters of support from each other. And so, given the timing of it, or the ask, sometimes it's challenging when this organization might also be submitting their own application. And so how do you balance, some of that? That's, I don't know. I don't know if that's a concern for every organization, but I think there were a couple of sentiments around that.
I wonder if expanding the definition of what a letter of support is, alleviate that, because I'm all for, like, it doesn't have to be this sister organization, but it could be a beneficiary, or it could be something else.
Yeah.
And maybe that might be easier. One of your beneficiaries that comes into your program every week, hey, could you write this? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the other thing where I thought about the time frame that it took them to complete the application. That was probably a part of it, just trying to get a letter and track it down and bird dog that to make sure you have it to put in your application.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's really the level of effort that it takes to get that is maybe more than it's worth.
And the small organizations, when it comes to grant writing, if they don't have someone that's into grant writing, or know of someone that will assist them, because I think that's a big thing, because grant writing is not easy. You just need someone to know what to ask for. You tell them what you want, but how to put down in a way that sounds business-like and honest.
Any questions or feedback from folks on the call? Oh, Jennifer.
So I'm thinking about the letters of support, and I understand the level of effort, but I guess for me, those are helpful to see what the community support is. And I know a lot of organizations do each other, they write them for each other, but particularly for a new program that's going into a neighborhood, I think it's important to get some sense of, does the neighborhood feel like they need it? So I wonder if there's a way besides a letter of support that we could ask for that. And maybe that's only for new ones. I know we make it optional, but we also still score it. I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's because we have organizations that come in and say the neighborhood needs this, but if we don't hear from beneficiaries or neighborhoods or anything, then we don't know that for sure. So I'd love to figure out some way that's less burdensome that can maybe still provide us with that information.
We talked about that a little bit at our last sub committee meeting, like what it like, I forget which question we were thinking about.
Well, I think
It had to do with need. It was the
Yeah.
discussion around need.
And it was more about like asking what the demand for the program is as
Yeah.
a way to kind of get at like, do people in the neighborhood actually want to take part in this, or, you know, something like that.
Yeah, maybe that would be helpful, because we have a couple of programs that we have learned that aren't getting great outcomes, and they're like, we keep offering this program and people don't show up, and it's like, okay, well then maybe there's not a need for this program. So if maybe that's the best way to capture that, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And that's why I wonder whether it can be the sort of the letters of support can, if that's what the point behind them is to sort of identify it or back up an actual demand or need, then perhaps it can be a letter of support, or a community survey, or like there are other ways that can there are multiple ways that box can be checked, and a letter of support is one, but there could be others in alternatives. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If that's the point behind the letters of support. Because sometimes the letters of support are more, in the past, have been more to back up the collaboration piece, and or to some extent the sustainability piece, because it talks about where other funds are coming from or something like that. So I've seen them kind of fulfill multiple purposes, but I didn't necessarily fully appreciate what if we had a singular purpose for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it probably originated, to Jennifer's point, to try to better understand the community need aspect. But I like the idea of maybe incorporating it into the need section, and asking that as a sort of pointed question.
Mhm.
Does the neighborhood need this?
One of the things I thought maybe think about is the organizations that are doing the same thing, two separate organizations. Why not? Now, I don't think we should be the ones to tell them, if y'all get together or join each other on one, it'd go a lot better for both of you. But
Yeah,
it should be something in there to tell them, that, hey, you're doing the same thing this other group is. Why not combine your efforts?
any other thoughts on feedback? And then we can get into some of the more specific proposed changes.
I think those, the bar graphs that are showing the
Mm-hmm.
history. I mean, what that tells me is we don't need to like wholesale change anything. We just need to get those neutral people on the green side. Like, do this a little bit more, intentionally to, there aren't any inherent, major problems. Just a lot of neutral and kind of agree.
Yeah, I would say, the biggest, the most consistent thing that we've heard is really, and it is reflected in this, and in the feedback form, in both that and the focus groups, is that the application really needs to be shortened and made to be less redundant, just the application itself, not the process. And questions about whether the presentation is necessary and some of the post award reporting requirements. That's the most consistent feedback. And I would say probably the most there's probably the most agreement among applicants on those areas. All right, so unless there aren't any other questions, go ahead.
Get it, but just want to make sure that the applicants are just a part of this process, right? And
Yes.
we're a part of this
Yes,
process.
Exactly.
And the public is a part of this process. And for better or for worse, the federal government is also a part of this process.
Better or worse.
So we just have to keep all of that in mind and not necessarily think in our minds that our purpose here is making the applicants happy and meeting all of their needs.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we can try to meet folks where they are on a lot of their issues.
Yes, yes, we can on some of the things, but
And
not
it'll
everything.
be mutually beneficial in a lot of ways, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the folks who are on the call, I'm gonna put some, something that I printed, in the chat, so you can feel free to, and can't open it up, let me know, I will.
Oh, is this McCoy's thing?
Yes, McCoy helped with this, thank you, McCoy. The sort of way to visualize a lot of the changes that we're doing, and I'm also gonna have it on the screen, so. So yes, thank you to McCoy for helping with that. I really appreciate it. And so fancy. Yes, Jennifer. Okay, let me get back to the. Okay, here we go. Okay. So we're going to talk about each of these sections separately. But first I want to talk about the pre-application. So that's the first sort of quadrant in the upper left area. So that's pre-application, and it's split up into green is applicants, blue is staff, orange is CDCAC. And those are, it's sort of like what's required of each of these groups. The light green is how the process currently works. The dark green is what we're proposing to change. And then similarly for blue and orange, that's kind of the color differentiation. So the way that this currently works, we generally release the NOFA in the Monday after July 4th. We are not proposing to change that. It'll still be released the Monday after July 4th. We always do a NOFA workshop. Again, not proposing to change that, still going to do a NOFA workshop. We've heard that is helpful, and we also think it's helpful, so we'll continue to do that, and especially with all these changes that we're proposing. I think that's going to be a really important workshop for folks to attend this year. Something that we are proposing to implement is a pre-application this year. Even before that, we are going to be opening what we're calling office hours or technical assistance sessions for applicants to schedule time with staff to specifically ask questions about, their proposal ideas or the application itself, really anything they want to know about the NOFA, to be able to get some one-on-one time with staff. We currently offer that, but it's more informal. It isn't like a, it's sort of there. I think there's just a note in the NOFA that says, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. We encourage it. But now we're trying to make it a little bit more formalized, make sure that folks understand that, no, we really want to walk you through this. We want to make sure that we're having a chance to talk with you before you submit an application. So we're going to be doing some of those technical assistance sessions leading up to the pre-application due date. Pre-application due date, we'd like for it to be due in mid-August. And really what we're looking at there is application eligibility. So is it eligible for any of the funding sources, and also program compatibility, just sort of what are they what are they going to be asking for? How much are they looking to ask for? And then we'll be able to kind of direct applications into, certain funding category. So like right now we have it split out where if you're a public service program, you can only apply for up to 35,000. If you are applying for something else, you can apply for up to 100,000. This will allow us to kind of be in closer contact with applicants so that they're actually applying for the amount that they're eligible to receive. Because we do get a lot of instances where folks are applying for way more than they are actually eligible to receive. So we're hoping that this will kind of help to alleviate some of those concerns. Applicants will then be notified 2 days later of their eligibility, and they'll be invited to submit a full application. We're going to be holding those office hours post pre-application as well. So that's going to be between the time that the pre-application is due and the full application is due. Currently, the way the process works is applications are typically due the Friday after Labor Day. We're going to be extending that a week to September 12th. So it'll be the 2 Fridays after Labor Day. And we're going to be doing completeness checks for applications. So we're going to be looking at applications to make sure that they're complete. They filled out all the sections, they've submitted all the required documents. If they haven't, we'll give them 2 days to cure any of those deficiencies. And if they don't cure them, they will not be invited to apply their application will not be evaluated. So we're hoping that all those additional measures, and I think a lot of these additional measures that we're proposing relate to some of the feedback we heard from CDCAC members just about, some applications, there's sections that are just copy and paste the same, or a section that's completely missing, or their budget is filled out completely incorrect. So hopefully some of these changes will alleviate some of those issues that we've seen in the application leading up to it, and maybe even reduce the number of applications at first, but hopefully once folks get used to it, it'll kind of even out there a little bit. Does anyone have any questions on any of that? Folks on the phone?
Not yet. I'm waiting for when you get further down.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second. Okay. Jennifer, could you email the document to folks who are on the call, who are virtual?
Yeah, I can try. Did you send me a PDF version?
I'll just.
It's in OneDrive. I'm just trying to resave it.
Okay, hold on. McCoy, Steve, Margaret, and who else? Chris on the call?
No.
No questions.
I'm emailing it to you now. Sorry about that. I don't know why it wasn't allowing me to share.
It's on OneDrive and it didn't want to.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. I had to step away. We have delays in Philadelphia and kid just checking in to confirm the delays and everything else. So sorry about that.
No worries. I put a document in the chat that McCoy helped me put together, which is basically a visualization of the changes that we're proposing.
Okay.
I'm emailing it to you because I can't figure out how to share it.
Oh, hang on one more sec. I'll be.
So it should be in your email now. Okay. So since I'm not hearing anything about the pre-application, we will move on to. Hold on. That's right. Hold on a second. Okay, so I'm going to move on to reviewers. So, and the sections don't totally match up to these sections, so just keep that in mind. But as far as reviewers, currently we have housing division staff, CDCAC members, and review and score all applications. And then we have subject matter experts who only review applications, only a few applications based on their area of expertise, but they do not score the applications. Right now, what we are proposing is the same reviewer, the same reviewer, so housing division staff, CDCAC members, subject matter experts reviewing a few of the applications and not scoring. But as far as subject matter experts, we're going to be creating a questionnaire to create some consistency around the subject matter expert reviews. So essentially, you know, everyone's going to be answering the same questions instead of right now, what they basically do is send us a blurb like, yes, we think this is a good application and here's why. These will ask more pointed questions about, you know, what we're really looking for. Maybe it could be, is there support from the community? Are there other organizations that are working on this issue? What are they doing to, you know, what do you have familiarity with the organization? I don't know exactly what the questions will be, but that'll be kind of it'll give some consistency. And so what we're proposing is that those, instead of you getting those the night of our presentations, those will then actually be uploaded to the applications for you to review as you're scoring applications. And so hopefully that'll, again, create some consistency in their feedback, but also allow us to give you guys those reviews a little bit sooner in your review process. Any questions on that? Okay, so to the application. So there's not a whole lot of difference between as far as when you will actually be getting the applications to start reviewing. Typically we send them about mid-September. We're proposing that it'll be around the same time, September 19th, that you'll be sent the applications. We are proposing to do away with application presentations for this year. So as it currently works, we meet every Wednesday in October to hear from applicants. So they come in and they do their 15-minute presentation. They talk about their application. They get questions. And we've just been doing that for many, many years. And again, it has become a little bit redundant with some of the repeat applicants. So we're actually going to be, we're proposing to shift to more of an application discussion process where instead of the applicants coming in to present their proposals, we'll be meeting as a full committee to kind of talk through each of the applications one by one. You won't be hearing directly from the applicants at all. It'll really be more of an opportunity for the committee to kind of meet and talk about the pros and cons of each application individually, look at their scores, how they compare to other CDCAC members, and kind of talk about what if they want to change their scores based on some of the discussion. We're proposing.
Caitlin, can I ask a question there?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Is that me?
Yeah.
So when we have the weekly discussion and we can change or modify our scores on the spot, on the text sheet that you sent us, it says staff will record each member's justification as to why they are changing scores. Why?
So
if I wanted to change my score based on the discussion, do I have to give you a justification that you then commit to writing?
So we're kind of basing this off of the county purchasing process, which, as I understand it, is kind of mirrored off the federal purchasing process. But in that process, yes, you do have to record a justification. It's really for circumstances where there's a challenge to the RFP. Right. For us, it is helpful to understand, you know, where folks are coming from and why scores are changing. So I think maybe if folks have a problem with that, kind of us recording the justification, what we could do is kind of talk about, you know, just generally take notes on what the discussion is and, you know, talk about why scores are either increasing or decreasing. It's helpful for us to have an understanding of all that when we do our debriefs with applicants later in the line. And we're also, you know, thinking about through this process starting this year, thinking about something that would be helpful for applicants is actually giving them their score sheets after the process concludes, and having formal kind of debrief sessions, which again are right now we do them, but they're informal, but actually sending them direct feedback and giving them the final scores. So all that to say is hearing why you guys are changing your scores, or what the pros and cons are of the applications is helpful for us when we are sort of doing those debriefs and kind of having those conversations with applicants after the fact.
Well, speaking just for myself, I mean, this is all subjective, and sometimes something's close, and whether you give it one score or another, it could just take a nudge, and it's hard to. In procurement, you have to, and you have to be able to depositions and litigation and argue your case. But in this process, I might find it difficult to tell you why. It's just, you know what? I gave the score, but I've read it again now because we've discussed it. And just, on second thought, I think, I'd go up one.
I think
And I
that's
would
going
be
to be
concerned
fine.
if that was shared with the reviewers. I'm sorry, with the applicants. If my
Yeah,
score
I'm
was.
okay with that. If others feel more comfortable with that, I'm totally okay with not sort of mirroring that aspect of the purchasing process.
So is it really about understanding why for a new process somebody changed a score, or is it more important to understand just in general, a general statement about why the scores are what they are?
I think that's probably the bigger concern is sort of what the pros and cons are of the application, why folks, because I will say that I have heard from the race team that there have been some questions about specific scores. So, they do send the applicants their final score sheets after. And there are like, well, why did I get a 5 here? And why did I get a 4 here? Or what did it? So, it's helpful to have that context, especially to know well, yeah, there was a lot of conversation about this one area, and here's why I think maybe the average score wound up being this, and this is what I was hearing from reviewers.
So it's more important to understand the kind of specific aspect of the application that we talked about, and someone brought up something and it prompted Steve to change his score, rather than Steve changed his score because it's just a different way to.
I think,
and I think in the discussion, we're going to capture it in the notes too. I mean, as Caitlin, we're trying to become more transparent in our feedback. And so in order to do that, we have to be a little more formal in how we track what the discussion and the issues are. But I don't think we would need to do that on an individual basis necessarily.
Yeah,
that's why
I don't see why it's relevant.
Right.
That it's been a change. I mean.
No, the bottom line is your application got this score, and here's why, and here's what was strong, and what was less strong.
And that's why I'm more in favor of just a more generalized statement of capturing the highlights of the discussion, which presumably are going to capture kind of the big reasons for changes, because I think what we are wanting to capture is like, like we discussed the other night, a notable change is where like somebody completely overlooked a section and, didn't score a section, or, and just happened to overlook that part, or, or when reviewing the application, happened to somehow miss that the application had dealt with X, and and they somehow just missed that or whatever. And so in the discussion that got pointed out and they picked up on it, and that notably changed the score. The fact that Steve maybe increased it by 1 or something, who cares? So that I think, if we're capturing just the highlights of the discussion, I think we capture the notable ups and downs, and the individual little bits of up and down, doesn't need to be gone into that specificity.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of where I'm landing too, is that we don't need to be and I mean, great, that's less work for us in these
Yes, exactly.
in this process. But yeah, I mean, I think it is important to have, if there are going to be fluctuations in individual, specific scores for an application, like, on, let's say, the budget or something, the average score changed from a 7 to a 4 because of the discussion. I think we would want to know why and sort of note that in the it just before the instance when we do have that, provide that feedback to the applicant.
Okay, can I ask though, because maybe I thought I was with you until that last statement, but if during the discussion it changed from a 4 to a 7, I think all we need to tell the applicant is it was a 7. I don't think we tell them that it went from 4 to 7 because of the discussion.
I agree with that. Like, they're never gonna see the interim scores, are they? They're only gonna see the score at the end. And so to me, if it average score went from a 4 to a 7, the statement.
Well, I think that we would be able, maybe not, they're not going to see that this went from a 7 to a 4 or a 4 to a 7, but they might say, well, why did I get a 4 on this piece of it? And I can say, well, the discussion from the committee indicated that here were the issues that the committee had. Not necessarily that, yeah, you because originally you were scored at a 10 and now you're at a 3. I mean, I don't think we would share that level of detail, but to have that context as to maybe why that score was changing, I think will be very important in those feedback sessions. That's what I was trying to say. Not necessarily that we're going to be giving them like.
I was with you again right up until the last second.
Yep, me too.
So,
we're not telling them of a change at all. We're saying it was a 7 for these reasons.
I'm not saying we are telling them of the change. What I'm saying is that. Okay, I'm sorry that this is that I'm making this confusing. What I'm saying is that they will see the final score. So if it's a 4, they might have a problem with that, and we'll be able to say, here's the reason why the committee decided that this was a 4, and not saying that we're not going to be sharing what their previous score was. It's really more of a, if you have a problem with it, we can share with you the reasoning with this score from the committee. This is what we heard during those sessions.
So the difference between I turned in a 7, Wendy turned in a 4. She explained why it was a 4, and I said, "Oh, that makes sense." It's not that. It's just members of the committee felt that something was missing.
Yeah, because I would imagine that if
what I did or what she did, it's just about like.
Right, because I would imagine that if the average score is changing during that discussion, the reason why will come out. I mean, it'll be very clear because we talked about it. Yeah. So having that context will be helpful information to share for us when we have to go back and provide that feedback. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that we're going to be like hanging you guys out to dry with the scores changing. Jennifer, did you have a comment?
I guess I had a question. I know with the race grant, they actually come up with a consensus score, but I think we're not talking about that, right? We're still talking about average scores.
Yeah, we're still talking about averages.
Okay.
We're not we already had that discussion, and we're not recommending consensus scoring.
Okay.
So if there's a certain issue there's a problem, it makes no difference whether everybody noticed it right away or it came up during the discussion. The problem is still the problem as it's reported to the applicant.
Correct. Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah. So with this change of not seeing the not having the proposal presentations, is there like a scenario in which you think maybe we would want to bring certain groups in if there's like a decision, like, I don't know if there's like a deciding factor and you want to hear from the groups maybe like firsthand rather like their application isn't enough?
Yeah, I mean, We talked about that, and sort of what the issue is. I think the problem that we keep coming back to is like an equity issue. Like if you don't offer it or require it for everyone and you only require it some, that there might be an issue with equity there. And some folks might not like that. I could see a scenario where, you know, at some point maybe we do something where, you know, if you meet a certain score threshold, then you're invited for a presentation. When we talked about it as a group, folks weren't super interested in that. I'm curious what other people think about that idea. But yeah, I mean, I think generally, as far as the applicant presentations, it kind of felt like, you know, it could be beneficial in a situation where it's like a new application to still have that presentation
It makes a lot of sense why you wouldn't want to require that
for everyone.
for like the repeat people who are coming in, probably seeing very similar things as they do every year, but
Right.
yeah, I knew about applications.
Yeah.
I'm still going back to, we have different user groups who are all giving input on this process. And as someone who was a new member last year for this process, I found that the applicant presentations extremely valuable.
Mhm.
Because some of the organizations I'd heard of, some of them I had no idea about them. And everything about an organization I did not feel was necessarily conveyed through the actual application. So I'm perfectly willing to try it without this year, but I would have had a much more difficult time last year if we hadn't have done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know it gets old for everybody who's seen it for the last, 5 years, but anyway.
So something that we were thinking about including in the application as sort of a way to supplement the application presentation opportunity, we'll call it, is like, folks can submit other sort of marketing collateral or things about their program, like maybe it's a video or, a brochure or a newspaper article, something that kind of highlights the organization or the program outside of just what they're submitting with the application. I mean, it's not a direct replacement, but yeah, I think that I think if we're going to do the presentations, because of sort of the equity issue,
Everybody.
you have to do it for either everyone or none at all. So I think we landed on none at all. I don't think that's to say that maybe it comes back in the future when we kind of start talking about the sort of overall structure of the program, which will come later in the year. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it's interesting because Wendy brought up a kind of a good point too, even like what Robert was saying earlier, that some people in the organizations aren't super familiar with grant writing.
Yeah.
And so like you were saying, sometimes the application doesn't encapsulate the whole organization.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a good idea to allow them to include those extra things, but yeah, it's interesting because you don't want to just judge an organization off of like all of the boxes ticked off on paper.
I know. Yeah, no, it's definitely it is an opportunity for that. But yeah, I think that the race program, they've sort of tried, we talk with them a lot. And they've tried to different sort of methodologies to kind of get all this. But I mean, it's they did presentations this year for the first time. And they had kind of changed the way that they scored based on the presentation and the actual application, so that they were equal weights basically. So you're scoring both the presentation and also the application, and then those are sort of factored in together for a final score. And so it really raised up some of those organizations that maybe didn't have the best grant application, but the review committee was really excited about their the presentation aspect. So yeah, so definitely something to consider, you know, as we kind of move forward. Jennifer?
So I worry that allowing additional stuff is also an equity issue because the organizations with the glossy videos will submit those. I mean, it's the same issue we always run into, right? The experienced grant writers, the glossy bespoke organizations have this collateral and other ones don't. And so I feel like we should either have everybody do it or have nobody do it.
Well, we did discuss that the collateral can be a wide range, and we also did put parameters around it. So we sort of said, like, you know, you can send in a video, but you know, it can't be more than 3 minutes or whatever. So, you know, and truthfully, if where's Jennifer Bodie's not here tonight, but yeah, she was like, but if they send in more than 3 minutes, we're not going to watch any more than 3 minutes. So trying to sort of curtail that it doesn't have to be big, long, fancy, that it just needs to, and maybe provide as prescriptive of what we want to get out of that, or what it can provide that's useful supplemental as possible. But
yeah, and I think, you know, as far as the equity issue, because, you know, the idea is to allow sort of a wide range of, or encourage a wide range of, you know, collateral that can be submitted with the application. You know, maybe that'll kind of alleviate some of those equity issues. And again, it'd be made available for everyone to submit. So I don't know. We did talk about that, Jennifer. I kind of feel like it's less of an equity issue than sort of requiring it for some and not all.
Caitlin, could I just
go ahead,
state
Steve.
just to restate for everybody what I said at the little subgroup meeting there. It wasn't a minority position, it was a me only position, which was I think the equity goes the other way. Just like we said, we wouldn't say that presentations were optional, because then now everybody's going to want to do a presentation, even if they hate it. If we say that a video is optional, everybody's got to do a video. And for these smaller groups, I know I should be able to just pick up my phone and go like that and woo, and in a matter of 5 minutes have a nice little 3-minute video. But I think it would take a lot of time and effort by people to come up with something that will be really quite marginal at best. And so I think the equity issue is arguing against the video. But I do recognize that it was a me only position.
What do others think?
And to me, it's not the equity issue. There very well may be an equity issue, but it is not all that different than the equity issue where some applications are written by an experienced grant writer and some are written by the program staff person. Mm-hmm. That, to me, is an equity issue, but there's not a whole lot that can be done about that. Yeah. And to me, it's it's kind of equivalent with the multimedia stuff.
One that's got somebody that really does the grants. They'll write everything in the world and really don't need as much funding as this other one. Someone might need it more than anybody and do it more. You just can't write grants.
Well, and there could be the case that allowing the videos and multimedia balances out the grant writing versus not equity issue, because you don't have a grant writer, but you send your intern to show up at the community event and like interview people.
But truthfully, you know, I have to play devil's advocate a little bit here, because I think the way that and even more so as we're moving to try and streamline the application and decrease character allotments and try and make the questions, more pinpointed and stuff. From my perspective, when I'm looking at these things, I'm actually not really paying a lot of attention to a lot of the words. I'm looking at, are they describing an actual program that I can tell what the heck they're actually delivering? I'm looking for data on, are they actually showing me that there's a need? I'm looking for outcomes that are measurable. And for the ones that have ever gotten funding before, I'm looking at, how well they did, what did they do with it the last time? I'm looking to see what their budget looks like. And a lot of those things have nothing to do with being grant writers. That has to do with, like, do you actually have a program and can you articulate it in a couple of sentences? Do you actually have data that proves that your program actually is needed? So to some extent, I'm like, if you actually have a program that's worth its salt and is serving a need, I don't know that you have to be all that fancy a writer to be able to fill it out. But
Yeah.
that's just me.
And hopefully, I mean, I am sort of going to go back to, hopefully simplifying the application, making it more clear as to what we're looking for, and sort of both making it more clear as to what we're looking for, but also clearing up some of the evaluation criteria as well, so folks have a better understanding of what exactly they're being evaluated against. Might help with some of those, issues around not having a grant writer or someone who's sort of specifically dedicated to writing the grant application. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll see. So unless there's any other feedback on this particular issue, I did want to talk really quickly about, we talked a lot about the application discussion sessions already. It'll be, again, sort of similar to how traditional purchasing process works. We're going to be splitting the applications into discussion sessions by category, and you'll, like I said, you'll get the summary sheets and the final reports still, to be able to sort of help with remembering all the various applications that you're reviewing during discussion sessions. So I put this calendar in here just to kind of help with sort of understanding the timing of everything. So this. See. So essentially, we're proposing October 22nd, 29th, November 5th, 12th, and 19th as the discussion session dates. I'm thinking maybe we won't need 5 weeks, so it might be condensed a little bit. But I guess we'll kind of see where we are, as we get into it and we kind of see how long it takes to kind of go through an application each night. So basically, scores will be due the Friday before each Wednesday session, so that we have enough time to kind of pull everything together, pull the score sheet together. And on each Wednesday session, you'll get that score sheet. It'll have every single reviewer's score for each review criteria. So, for the needs section, Laura gave it a 3. Elizabeth gave it a 5. You'll be able to see kind of what each person is, how each member is scoring. And then you'll be able to have a discussion about each application during and sort of specific merits of the proposal for each application during that session. So you can talk about what I liked about the application, what I didn't like about it. You know, I gave this I thought that the budget deserved a 2, but you gave it a 7. Why was that? You know, it kind of allows us to talk about the application in a little bit more detail than we are talking about it now. Again, we talked about sort of what we're recording. We won't be recording sort of your justification for why and sort of giving that information to the applicants, but it will be helpful for us to understand why things are shifting in the way that they are shifting, and you know, what folks liked about a proposal and what they didn't like about it. You'll be able to modify your scores on the spot. And yeah, we'll kind of go from there as far as developing a final score for each application, kind of on the spot each night. Does anyone have any questions about that?
They have to bring a computer to change your scores?
We'll be able to do it for you probably. Okay. Yeah. It'll be an Excel sheet. We'll probably have it up on the screen and everyone will kind of be able to see it. Yeah.
I think I look forward to spending a similar amount of time reviewing and scoring each application, spending less time reading because they're hopefully shorter and simpler, and more time thinking about my scores and why I scored them the way I scored.
Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of interested in that too, because I think that'll give us I think it'll help to make sure that we're really the proposals that are the best are kind of rising to the top. Does anyone else have any other questions?
A new person.
Sure.
So for when you say the CDCAC scores are submitted weekly, and maybe it's just because it's cut off, but is that what the yellow days are?
Yes. So, that it is cut off for some reason. I don't know why.
So what's what is being submitted weekly?
Okay. Yeah. So we're going to be splitting up the applications that we're reviewing each week. So it'll be like we're reviewing these 8 applications on October 22nd. So you'll need to submit your scores for those 8 applications by the Friday before. So essentially it just gives you an idea of what you need to be scoring each week so that you don't have to like rush and score all 45 applications in the first week that you get the applications. Yeah.
And they'll submit them in whatever it's going to be that is in due. Like,
yeah.
The way you access the application is the same place where you insert your score.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you said we can change them.
Yeah. So you'll be able to go in and either change them. I mean, I think once you submit your scores, we'll probably say like, don't go in and change them until we actually are in the review session. Because then it will screw up the score sheet basically. But yeah, you'll be able to change them kind of on the spot in the discussion session.
So we can submit our scores, we can enter our scores anytime after we receive the applications from staff in the middle of September.
Right.
But the scores have to be entered for a certain group no later than the yellow dates shown up there.
Yes, yeah. Which is different than we do it now. Like right now, you can kind of you can change your scores whenever there's a final due date. So it's really going to be kind of more like everyone's going to have to be really good about getting their scores in on time.
So there's like a terminology. It's like the yellow date is like submit preliminary score.
Yes.
And then after the green date, it's some point
On the green date is
submit
that
your final score.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, that brings up a good question for me. Like, would we, like after the review session, what if someone leaves that night and says, oh, you know what? I really should have not won a 10 instead of a 9. Is that something that because from my perspective, like, sure, but then we don't have necessarily the conversation aspect of it. What do you guys think about that? I think that's okay, or?
I'm sorry, could you say that one more time?
So I guess like after the review session, so say on the 22nd, we have our review session, we review 8 applications. And, we talk about our final scores. But then one reviewer goes home and on October 23rd, they decide they want to change something. Are we okay with that? What do you guys think?
I say no.
Okay.
We did our best holiday because we're trying to stick with our procedure that we're going to stick with.
I think for transparency's sake, it kind of makes sense to have everything, all the scores final after that review session, but I'm curious what other people think.
I'm not allowing changes later, but I also know that after that night, I'm not going back. I'm turning to the next.
Yeah, just want to keep it transparent. You don't want like, oh, it was better change the school for them.
Yeah.
And then you have no record as to if I
That's
move
why.
from a 7 to a 2.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I agree. I just want to make sure that others are.
Caitlin, I'm totally a composter, so I am absolutely that person who the next day is like, well, maybe. But I think we do have to be sort of like tax day, right? You gotta pay your taxes by April 15th at 11:59 and set a hard deadline for us. Even though I guarantee you, every Thursday I'll be like, yeah, maybe, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It also like begs the question of bias. He's like, go and talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. You could go talk to like the program director of one of the organizations or something. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Time. Oh, we got it here. Okay. Let's go on to ranking. So this is again going to look pretty similar to the way we currently do this. Since we'll have those final scores on the evenings, we'll actually probably be able to get you guys your final scores pretty quickly after your final score sheet pretty quickly after those review sessions wrap up. So I'm just estimating maybe by November 22nd, we'll be able to share the final score sheet with you. And this will give you some time between when you between when the December ranking meeting is to be able to kind of look at the score sheet and kind of see where everything shook out. And again, it'll have the final average CDCAC score, final average staff score, and the average of the 2 scores together. Everything will be organized by highest to lowest scores. And then we are going to can keep dot night, our ranking voting session. It's essentially going to be the same process as it is now. Everyone will get a certain number of votes for each application, for each category. You'll be able to kind of distribute the votes based on each category as you see fit. And that is, kind of up to you to decide how you want to interpret that. Typically, it's sort of applications that are most needed in the community, but it really is kind of unique to each reviewer how you want to interpret that priority. Something that we want to add to the process is to be able to translate votes for each application into a certain number of bonus points. So right now, the way it kind of works is when we have our ranking, sort of where each proposal shakes out as far as how it ranks within each category and the scores, and then staff kind of uses that to determine the budget recommendations. But we're going to be we haven't figured out exactly how it's going to work, but translating the number of votes that each application gets into a certain number of bonus points, and that'll be added to the final score. So essentially, it'll kind of help to lift up maybe some of the applications that we talked about that maybe didn't score great, but there's a lot of community support for it, or we heard it really does seem like it's a program that's needed in the community. And so that'll kind of be added to the final score and kind of help staff when we're pulling together the final budget recommendations. Anyone have any questions there?
Not I.
Hey, moving right along. This is proposed schedule sort of at a glance. And this was in the write-up that I sent you as well. And again, it will be shared with In the NOFA, we'll be talking about it again, so you don't need to memorize it or anything, but it's just something to kind of look at and kind of see what we're kind of thinking about as far as timing. And then as far as next steps, we're going to be meeting next week again with the CDCAC subgroup to continue talking about application questions, application contents, the evaluation criteria. We're going to be coming back to the committee once again in next month in June to talk about some of those proposed changes and kind of what the application is going to look like. I'm hoping to do at that meeting, do a overview of our new software. Fingers crossed. If not, it'll have to be in September. But we're going to try to do it in June. And then, yeah, if you guys are all okay with the way the application looks and the how everything are moving forward, we're going to be releasing the NOFA in early July. So that's there. Questions?
How are you feeling about all this?
I'm cool with it. I'm excited. I think it's a new. We haven't changed the way we do things in a long time, so I think I'm good with it. Ask Jennifer; she's been here longer than me.
I'm excited. I think these are some good changes, and we'll see if we hate them, we can always change them again the following year.
Yeah. Okay, so since I'm not hearing any other questions or concerns, I think we can continue the conversation next month. And yeah, thanks for hearing us out. Appreciate it. Do you have any chair reports or anything? Nope. Member reports? Great. I don't have any staff reports because this is like what I've been working on for the last. So this is basically what I've been working on. So other than that, we do not have our CDBG or home allocations yet from HUD. I talked to our HUD rep yesterday. She said that statutorily we're required to get it within the next 10 days, but she was like, well, we'll see if that happens. It's like, awesome. We don't follow statutes anymore. And yeah, other than that, we're moving along. Goodwill, the project you guys saw in March, is going to the board this weekend. So fingers crossed that goes through. And yeah, I don't think I have anything else.
Do you remember if the Goodwill project covered that little strip mall next to it? Or
no, it doesn't.
It does not.
Oh, interesting.
No.
Small.
Yeah, it's literally just the Goodwill site. And they're doing some improvements to Route 50 as a part of the site plan. But yeah, no, the businesses next to it are not included. Good.
I was concerned about forcing them out.
Right, I remember thinking like, are they part of this project? Where are they like?
I think someone asked that. You asked about it at the last meeting, but I think they said that they've been involved in the planning process pretty heavily. Like they've provided comments on everything, and so far they've been pretty supportive. So
they've had discussions, and they were critically involved in the planning, particularly regarding the driveway part that separates the two of them and how that integrated into the plan and everything. So, yeah, but no, they were, because there's a big built, offices on top of that strip mall. And yeah, the owner did not, Goodwill approached them to try and incorporate it, but there was no interest. So.
Got it. All right. Oh, Jennifer, did you have a staff report?
I did have a staff report. I wanted to let you all know that Rhoda, who you all know and have been working with for many years, is retiring in 2 weeks. She'll be leaving the county. we're very happy for her. We're very sad for us. So if you want to pass along any wishes, I'm sure she would love to hear them. She's been the Tenant Landlord Commission liaison for years, but she's also, as you all know, been involved in CDCAC, certainly with proposal review, and she manages most of the CSBG grants. So she has been played an important role in that. So we will miss her.
Yes, very much so.
Will the position be backfilled?
Not currently, no. We're gonna, budgets are a little tight, so we're gonna kind of hang on and see how that all works.
Well, if the committee is in agreement, can you guys give Rhoda our collective?
Sure, yeah, of course, we would love to, yes.
Thanks.
Well,
Thank
all right.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Everyone, have a good rest of your day.
Thank you,
Bye,
Caitlin,
thank
for
you.
all
Thank
your
you.
work on the whole project.
Yeah, this
thank
is
you
so
guys.
cool.
You guys-
Bye.
Thank you.
Yes.